Hi, and welcome to the Health Begins with Mom show. I am Dorit Palvanov, your host. On this podcast, I will share insights and interviews on health, parenting, and explore the question of what does it take to thrive as women, wives, and mothers. Now, let's get going with today's episode. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Health Begins with Mom podcast. This is Dorit Palvanov, your host. Today we are talking about the regret of having children. And this is very interesting to me. As you know, I am myself also a mom of 3 girls. And the question of am I happy being a mom? Am I happy with this decision? It comes up a lot in my life as well. And so when I work with women, this comes up a lot. The question of, did I do the right thing? And so I've did some research online and I came across a few articles. One is actually called "I Regret Having Children," and it's written by Anne Kingston, and I found it on the website mcleans.ca. And then the other resource I found online was a TED Talks by Kristen Rader, I think it's called. That's how you pronounce it. And it's called "I Don't Want Children. Stop Telling Me I'll Change My Mind." I actually watched that TED Talks a few weeks ago, and I actually loved it. I was intrigued by the title. In the beginning, I will admit I was judgmental of it because, it's kind of radical in this sense. But after watching it, it made total sense. And I actually came to agree with what she's saying. And so today I wanted to talk about this phenomena of questioning ourselves and looking back and regretting giving birth or regretting being a mother, and how we can reframe that to ourselves, and how we can still find a way to thrive in the midst of this crazy world and in the midst of this chaos. And so what I want to do is I want to read that article to you so that you have a bit more of a context and also understanding of the topic. And then I'm going to suggest some of my own perspective. And again, guys, this is my perspective. And so yes, it will be biased because it's my opinion. You are always welcome to comment. You're welcome to submit your own opinion. But today I'm going to share my personal view, my personal opinion after reading this article, and then I'm going to give you an action task of how you can maybe reframe this for yourself if you are feeling called to do so. So I'll start with reading the article, and then we'll jump into the other things. So the article, as I said, is written by Anne Kingston, and I think she's a journalist in this magazine, Maclean's, and she goes like this: "I regret having children." And then the subtitle is, "In pushing the boundaries of accepted maternal response, women are challenging an explosive taboo and reframing motherhood in the process." At first glance, Amy is like many busy young moms. She's 34, lives in Alberta, works full-time, and is devoted to her 5-year-old. "I love my son with all my heart," she says. "My life revolves around this child. 4 nights a week from May to June are spent at a sports field," she says. "All his schoolmates do it, so if he doesn't, he's left out." When discussing motherhood, however, Amy deviates from the maternal script. If she could make that choice over again, she says she wouldn't. She never wanted children. And then there is a quote. I was very independent, she says. Her husband did. Her husband was the one wanting children. So it would have been a deal breaker, she says. Parenthood put an unbearable strain on the marriage. Her husband wasn't as involved as she wanted, and then they separated. Life is difficult, Amy reports. Our child has 2 homes, and I'm still doing 90% of it on my own. Amy's candor is part of a growing yet contentious conversation about parental regret, one primarily focused on mothers. Social media provides one hub, from the 9,000-member Facebook group I Regret Having Children, to a Facebook community with more than 2,600 members founded by Lauren Byrne, a 32-year-old ER nurse and mother of 2 who lives in Newfoundland. Byrne doesn't regret having children, she tells Maclean's, though women on the site say they do. Byrne's group is private and carefully monitored, a necessity given the criticism and judgment admitting regret can provoke. French psychotherapist Corinne Mayer stoked an international firestorm and condemnation in 2008 with her manifesto, No Kids, 40 Good Reasons Not to Have Children. Her 2 children left her exhausted and bankrupt, and she couldn't wait for them to leave home, she wrote. In 2013, Isabella Dutton, a 57-year-old British mother of 2 grown children, created furor with a Daily Mail essay headlined, The Mother Who Says Having These 2 Children is the Biggest Regret of Her Life. By 2018, however, Dutton and Mayer are no longer freakish outliers. Parental regret, or the last parenting taboo as it's dubbed in the media, has been covered by everyone from the BBC to Marie Claire to today's parent. The discussion has been stoked by the first scholarship on regret. Israeli sociologist Orna Donat thrust it into the spotlight with her 2015 book Regretting Motherhood, a Study, based on interviews with 23 Israeli women, all anonymous, aged 26 to 73, 5 of them grandmothers. Unsurprisingly, women who express regret are called selfish, unnatural, abusive, bad moms, or believed to exemplify the whining culture we allegedly live in, as Donat puts it. One commenter called Dutton an utterly miserable, cold-hearted, and selfish woman. Even Donat has been savaged for her research. One critic suggested she be burnt alive. Discussing maternal regret raises ethical dilemmas, but is necessary, says Andrea O'Reilly, a professor at York University's School of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies, and the author of 18 books on motherhood. And there is a quote. I understand the protection of children, but if you completely enforce that, you have no mother voices telling their story, and you don't want that either. End quote. And what we're learning about regretful mothers appends binary thinking that women who regret having children must be neglectful or substandard parents. It's motherhood these women regret, not the children. Dutton expressed love for her offspring. I would cut off my arm if either needed it. It was maternal strictures she bristled against. I felt oppressed by my constant responsibility for them. In today's Parent, Augustine Brown called her children the best things I have ever done and assured readers she wasn't a monster before expressing conflicted feelings. What I'm struggling with is that it feels like their amazing life comes at the expense of my own. She wrote, expressing remorse for this life I wanted so badly and now find myself trapped in it. Feeling trapped or suffocated is a common theme in Donat's work. Mothers felt as if the metaphorical umbilical cord binding them to the children were in fact wrapped around their neck. Many women said they felt pressured to have children. So did German novelist Sarah Fisher, author of Die Mutterglückslüge, The Myth of Mothering Joy, Regretting Motherhood, Why I Would Rather Have Become a Father, published in 2016, who writes she knew she'd make a mistake when the contractions started. The premise that motherhood is not a one-size-fits-all role shouldn't come as a surprise in 2018, given the rise of the childless by choice movement or an international decline in birth rates. Still, it's received as an affront to the sanctity of motherhood and the entrenched belief that the maternal instinct is innate and unconditional, despite ample historical evidence to the contrary. In pushing the boundaries of accepted maternal response, however, something else is happening. A small group of women are reframing motherhood, an institution increasingly idealized and commodified to near absurd ends. June Cleaver has been replaced by Jessica Alba, the former actress who runs a billion-dollar organic baby goods empire and posts Instagram images of perfect airbrushed domesticity for her millions of followers. Celebrity tabloids are fueled by maternity mania. Beyoncé's 2017 Instagram post announcing twins was the most shared on Instagram ever. Pressure on women to have kids is intense, says Amy. I work with a lot of girls, and if they haven't had kids, they're told the clock is ticking. Predictably, one of the first interview questions fielded by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle was when they'll start a family. Simultaneously, the demanding, exhausting, self-sacrificing, and often thankless work of mothering, the most important job a woman can have, as Ivanka Trump put it in a 2016 campaign video, has never been more restrictive, scrutinized, and questioned. Anti-nationalist philosopher David Banneter, the subject of a recent New Yorker profile, even argues no one should have children on compassionate grounds, given the painfulness of life. Add to that the notion that children bring self-fulfillment or self-actualization, and it becomes a breeding ground for regret. But mothers voicing regret also signals something else. A larger groundswell of maternal reckoning. One Augustine Brown compares to the Me Too campaign. We still can't talk honestly about what it's like to live with those pressures and those sacrifices, she tells Maclean's. Response to her story was overwhelmingly positive, she reports. Save one woman, and then there is a quote. She told me I should see a therapist and that my children deserved a better mother. End quote. Yet dozens of women wrote to thank her for making them not feel so alone or abnormal. Donat's book has also been a sensation. When published in Germany, an English translation arrived in 2017, #regretting motherhood trended on that country's Twitter. Expanding the vocabulary of motherhood helps all women, Donuts tells Maclean's. We need to make it easier for mothers to be mothers, but to also rethink the policies of reproduction and the very obligation to become mothers at all. Augustine Brown is more direct. We're angry, we're fed up, and we're on the verge of something. Regret requires choice, so there's little surprise that expression of parental regret mirrors the arrival of the pill, and with it, the decision to delay or even forgo reproduction. The first indication came in 1975 when advice columnist Ann Landers asked readers, quote, if you had to do it all over again, would you have children? End quote. Of more than 10,000 responses, 70% said no. The few attempts to quantify parental regret since have shown mixed results. A 2002-2003 study by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services found that 3% of parents disagreed with the statement. Quote, "The rewards of being a parent are worth it despite the cost and the work it takes." End quote. A 2016 German study found 8% of 1,200 parents polled said they would choose not to have children again. Traditionally, regret has been viewed as the pure view of the childless. Thomas Gilowitz, a Cornell University psychologist famed for research that indicates people are far more likely to regret things they haven't done than things they have, examined people with high IQs. Not one regretted having children. Several reported regretting not having a family. That assumption has been challenged, however, by the childless by choice movement and research debunking the myth that babies have a bonding effect on marriage or that children bring happiness. A 2010 American Sociological Association study found that parents were more likely to be depressed than their child-free counterparts, and that people without kids were happier than any other group. The notion that motherhood is a sacred role rather than one of the most profound and complex human relationships has made it somehow magically exempt from regret. Donat tells McLean's, "In every other realm where regret is experienced, people soldier on," she notes. Her research even indicates that women who feel guilt over regret are more conscientious parents. "The more I feel regret, the more I give them," a mother interviewed by Donat said about her 2 children. Donat views suspicion over the existence of maternal regret as consistent with the traditional rejection of women expressing negative responses to motherhood, pointing to the reluctance to accept postpartum depression until the late 20th century. Before then, mothers reporting perinatal sadness were dismissed as neurotic. Regret differs from more common ambivalence, Donat says. And then there is a quote, "There are mothers who experience ambivalent feelings but do not regret becoming mothers. And there are mothers who regret becoming mothers and are not ambivalent about motherhood." End quote. Conflating the two precludes listening to mothers who lament having given birth. Quote, "If we rush into talking about the hardships of motherhood only, then we empty regret of any content and neutralize any ability to examine the axiom that motherhood is necessarily experienced as worthwhile by all mothers everywhere." End quote. Parental regret also highlights gendered asymmetry around parenting. While fathers are increasingly active in child raising, most child care and housework is still performed by women, as data from StatsCan's 2015 General Social Survey indicates. Donat has also interviewed men who regret fatherhood and has found one difference is that most men who became fathers, even though they didn't want to, did so because their partner wanted to be a mother and they didn't want to live without her. Quote, "They made their decisions without being threatened by divorce, as opposed to several women in my study." End quote. Stephen March, author of The Unmade Bed, The Messy Truth About Men and Women in the 21st Century, often writes about fatherhood. He says he has never met a father willing to admit to regret. Quote, "I can think of only a few who might even have felt it," end quote, he says. "Fathers' regret tends to be expressed with their feet," says York University O'Reilly. Quote, "They walk away," end quote. While men are judged for doing so, they don't face the same censure as women, she says. Quote, "Men's identities never collapsed into their parental one. If you're a bad mother, you're a bad woman. If a father is late at daycare, it's poor thing he's busy. A mother who's late is viewed as selfish and irresponsible, end quote. That's changing, O'Reilly believes, though she questions the extent. Quote, some men may feel their children are central to their identity, but I've never seen it, end quote. Exacerbating gendered parenting imbalances is the fact that as mothers enter the workforce in record numbers in the 1970s, parenting philosophies increasingly embraced hovering attachment. Helicopter parent was coined in the 1960s. Attachment parenting was introduced in 1992 by evangelical physician William Sears, based on three tenets: breastfeeding, co-sleeping, and carrying babies close in slings. Once regarded as fringe, it's now the dominant parenting mode among white, middle-class educated women, says O'Reilly. It's like a cult. Time spent by parents with their kids has doubled in 4 decades, the Economist revealed in November. In an analysis of 11 healthy countries, mothers spent an average of 104 minutes a day caring for children in 2012, up from 54% in 1965. Men do less, but far more than they did in the past. 50 minutes a day, up from 16. Parenting standards have become far more draconian since O'Reilly raised her kids in the 80s and 90s, she says, pointing to a confluence of forces: the rise of materialism, consumerism, neoliberalism, and social media, turning parenthood into a performance. Parents now raise children in a far more difficult, competitive world and are pressured to do more with far less, she says. Expectations have been ramped up to such a point that standards are impossible to achieve. Declining fertility rates and older, more educated first-time mothers have also contributed to heightened expectations. The fertility rate in Canada has dropped from 2.1, the replacement level needed for the population to renew itself without immigration, in 1971 to 1.6 in 2016. Older mothers are used to autonomy, but children don't go as planned, she says. Quote, so much of motherhood is very much out of your control, end quote. So yeah, this article is pretty lengthy, and I didn't want for this podcast episode to be too long, and so I'm just gonna, so she goes on, and she gives more resources and more quotes, but I wanted to read the last paragraph, and then I'll share my own view. So Donath predicts discussion of maternal regret will remain polarized between rage and denying its existence and acknowledging its significance and its social meanings, even as more women come forward. There's no catharsis, no happy ending of the sort expected from women, she says. Recognizing regret as part of the maternal experience requires a sea change in thinking that mothers are owners of their bodies, thoughts, emotions, imagination, and memories, and are capable of acknowledging whether all of this was worthwhile or not. And that may be regretful mother's most lasting legacy of all. So I think this is, honestly, it took me some time to wrap my head around this article. I've read it many times, and although, like I said in the beginning, although I've had some judgment towards this topic in the beginning, because what do you mean? I'm a mom. I've chosen to be a mom. I craved to be a mother. I think a lot of what is written in this article is true. It's true. I think we're so lucky to, and we're so blessed to live in times where when it's allowed to express, these thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And at the end of the day, it is an emotion, it is a feeling, and I think it has its place. And so making it a taboo, turning it into something that is, it's like you will be sanctioned if you don't express it, keep it in your belly forever or you will die. I think that's wrong because as we know, and I talk about this all the time, emotional mastery it's very important, and it's important for us to learn to do for ourselves, but also to teach this to our children so that they feel like it's easier for them to move through life, because we are human feelings. We are not human beings. We're not human doings. We are human feelings, right? And so I will never forget, I actually had this conversation with my husband around after, I think after I had my third baby. And I clearly told him, crying in our bed, that is really hard. That, I even said that sentence, that motherhood destroyed me. It really, I did feel like I regret doing this to myself, right? I regret having children, or why did I do this to myself? I'm such a lousy mother and I'm screwing them up, and all of that, negative thoughts and feelings. And so, to sum it up, I think there is a place for women to express what they're feeling, excuse me, with regards to motherhood or this choice, because this is this one thing that is very important to acknowledge in this decision or choice, is that there is no way back, right? Once you decide, you're kind of screwed till the rest of your life. And so, but I don't think that as a young woman I would be able to fully answer this question, do you want kids or not, fully understanding what it entails. It's only after you go through the process that you can express your feelings and what you think about this process. And so definitely, I love the fact that it's no longer a taboo, and that more women are talking about this and expressing themselves. So I think it's brilliant. I don't think that when we have in our society topics that are sort of like not allowed to even bring up, I don't think it enriches our society. I don't think it brings people together. I think the contrary is true. I think it creates disconnection between people, right? Because how can we relate to one another, especially if it's two women having a conversation? How can we relate to one another if we are sort of like having a small talk, talking about like superficial things, not just sort of like touching the surface level, scraping the surface level, not really getting deep into what's really in your belly, like what is really going on in your head. And even if it's like the worst things, like expressing that I regret children, there is healing in expressing it, right? So I truly believe that when I'm having those hard times, and I do express it either to my husband or to my closest friends, I do feel better. I do feel better because, especially if I'm not judged, and especially if no one says anything following that, if I'm just allowed to just be there and sit with the emotion, there's definitely healing there. So, if you choose to be a mother, I think we have to understand that it will require us to level up. And I think that's what I'm taking away from this article. It requires us to grow. It requires us to learn. It requires us to stretch ourselves, to grow up. It will even require us sometimes to become an adult and to stop complaining, stop playing the victim, playing small, looking for mommy and daddy to save you or to do things for you. And that's what it means to become an adult, right? Sometimes motherhood will even require you to do things differently than your own mom, right? You will be stretched to be the mom that you didn't have, perhaps. So, and the way I view motherhood is as an opportunity to express your true potential as a woman and human being, right? I'm not saying that it's easy. Of course it's hard, but I think challenges and suffering, if you will, I don't like to use this word, but let's use it for this argument's sake. It has a place. And when you are able to pass through it, move through it, and prove to yourself that you have survived, you have come to the other side alive, it's a proof of your true human potential and the true power that you have inside of you. So I think instead of regretting or resisting this experience, try putting on a different set of glasses, right? Glasses that will show you a different point of view and different perspective. Because if you have been given the privilege of birthing children, you were meant to do great things. You just maybe don't know how. But the how is easy, right? The how, in my opinion, the how is learnable. The how is a skill which you can perfect over time with practice. And I think one of the biggest things that I know from my own personal experience, being a mom of 3 kids, is the power of asking for help. And the how can definitely unfold from there, because there are people in the world who have been in it longer than you, who have much more experience than you, who have learned the topic. And it's okay to go and ask them to teach you. Just tell them, show me how. So your action task for today is to think about one thing that you are resisting in motherhood. One thing that feels really hard to you in the process of raising your children and also raising yourself, right? And share it with me. Share it with me. I will personally hold your hand and cheer you on. So you can find me either on Facebook. I go under Dorit Palvanov, or you're welcome to email me, dorit@healthbeginswithmom.com. So I want you to keep nurturing, keep mothering, and keep taking care of yourself, because your family's well-being begins with you, the woman, the wife, and the mother. I love you so much. I'm sending you so much love and many, many blessings. Until next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Health Begins with Mom show. I love hearing from you, so please post your comments and questions over at healthbeginswithmom.com/podcast. If you love the show, please share it on social media and in your real life with other moms who might enjoy this content. And if you have a burning question or topic you'd like me to hit on the show, just drop me a line at dorit@healthbeginswithmom.com. And if you love this show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review, and subscribe. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Much love and many blessings.